everyone. Welcome to the screencast on mistaken behavior. This relates back to the content in your textbook. So some of it's a repeat. Much of it is really expanding upon that to help you understand it at a deeper level. So mistaken behavior is really when a child engages in unwanted or negative behavior as a part of learning what the social rules and norms are. Mistaken behavior, whether intentional or not, and that's really important here. Whether the child intended to make that mistake or not, it is an opportunity to learn. We think of children in academic setting and think about math. When a child makes a mistake in a math problem, we say, what's 4 minus 2? And they say 1. We look at that as an opportunity to correct that error. We might say, okay, 4 minus 2. You have 1, 2, 3, 4. How many is that? 4. 4 minus 2, I take away 2. How many do I have left? 1, 2, 2. So we do that in an academic sense. I see this with my child all the time with reading, where she is a pretty proficient first grade reader, but she'll make assumptions on certain words. And that's when I say, oh, that doesn't look like the word I think it is. Why don't you look a little more at the sounds of those letters? So we do that there, but oftentimes when children have mistaken behavior, we decide that is a time not for learning, but instead reinforcements or punishments for a child. So we're going to dive deeply into that in this lecture. I have my very messy notes off to the side, so if I keep looking away from the screen, as always, you know why. So we have the Harlow's relational patterns. These are in your textbook. The encounterer is the most mature pattern where children take initiative to understand the world. They attempt independent problem solving, and this is for all ages of children and really even adults, people. This is not about, oh, I'm a certain age, therefore I'm mature and I'm able to do that. So example might be where a teacher sits on a table and the child says, hey, there's a no bottoms on the table rule. How come you can sit on the table and I can't? They're not trying to be bratty, so to speak. They're really trying to understand why that rule doesn't apply in that moment. Or maybe the rule does apply and you made a mistake and you forgot. So a child is not challenging your authority, but really trying to understand when rules apply and when they don't. The adjustment level is where children adjust their behaviors according to the expectations of other people. They will often reference others before engaging in behavior. They might watch what other children are doing or watch and see your reaction. So an example of this is when we give children rewards for compliance. We give every kid a sticker for sitting quietly in a group time. That's this adjustment level. Or we see a child... this happens a lot. There's a child who might have behavior that pushes the limits more often than not. We sometimes refer to them as the ringleader. And other children follow suit once that child does that. These are the children in that adjustment phase where they're trying to understand what behavior is acceptable based on the reaction of others. And then we have the survival level. And this is the most immature pattern where a child is just trying to survive and get their needs met. An example of this might be a child who's largely ignored except for when they're having a temper tantrum. And this child will repeat that pattern in all other learning environments. By the way, I want to point out, I'm noticing my typos in here. I'm really sorry about that. Looks like I've dropped off some N's, and I will make sure to fix that in the future. So a question for you, which relational pattern do you believe is the most rewarded in school settings? Give you a second to think about that. If you answered adjustment, you are correct. This is really what we rely on most in the field, where we say good job to children and we set them up to look for our feedback, or we give them stickers, or we give them prizes to give us the behavior we want. So now the question is, which relational pattern do you believe is the most conducive to not just child engagement, but also that higher order learning? This is a super smart group, so I trust that you all said encounterer. This is the most mature pattern. It's because really children are looking inside of themselves and deciding what is right and wrong for themselves. So now we're going to talk about Cottrell's levels of mistaken behavior. So we're going to put Harlow aside for just a moment. We're going to talk about Cottrell and then we'll weave them together. So for Cottrell's levels of mistaken behavior, we have one, experimentation, and this is about curiosity and a child's involvement in the learning process. 2 is socially influenced, and this is really a desire to please, to copy someone else, to make others happy. And then 3, strong unmet needs. It's really get needs met. This is getting needs met. I want to be clear, is often confused by adults. This isn't always the most survival-based needs. This isn't always just food and water and safety. Sometimes a child has a need that is not as obvious or is higher level. And so I want to bring that in as well. And it's also not what we perceive what they need, but what the child perceives that they need. So how do these relate? So level 1 is Cottrell's experimentation. You can probably guess that is hand in hand with the encounterer pattern for Harlow. I can imagine at this point you know where we're going. Level 2, socially influenced, is the adjuster. And 3, strong unmet needs, is that survival level. And again, the survival level is about the child's perception of their own survival. Okay, I'm trying to get to the next slide. There we go. So let's relate this back to Maslow that we talked about last week. So we know that there's the basic needs down here, safety needs and psychological needs. Up here we have, the safety needs and the physiological needs. Those are physical needs. Psychological needs up here are esteem and belonging. And then at the top is self-actualization. So the survival and the unmet needs, and it looks like the recording is blocking that out, so I'll take myself away for a moment. Survival and unmet needs here really comes into this basic needs, the child's perception of their own basic needs. And then up here at self-actualization is that curiosity and encounterer phases. Children can really operate at that higher level because other needs are being met, which then puts adjustment and desire to please right there in the middle under psychological needs. I'm going to switch this camera back. Okay, so the things to consider around mistaken behavior. 1, mistaken behavior can be on purpose, and that does not mean that it's malicious. That's actually the highest level of mistaken behavior. When I learned about this, I really shifted my own thinking of when I had challenging behavior and purpose. In the past, it would really be a trigger for me, what we call a hot button. It would really kind of tick me off, like this kid's challenging my authority, or they're just trying to, be a smarty pants. And once I learned about this, I went, oh, these are my smarty pants kids in a good way. They're really trying to understand how to be a great citizen. Number 2, aggression is a serious mistaken behavior, and it can come in all different forms. It can come from a survival need, or it can come from I'm going to do this on purpose and see if the rules apply to me. Just because it seems like a more rudimentary behavior does not mean that it's not actually thoughtful. And down here, we can see different forms of mistaken behavior and its uses. So when there's physical form of mistaken behavior, what we refer to often as physical violence, that allows one's to assert one's will. My brother didn't do what I want him to do. I punched him in the arm. That's me getting my will. Psychological is mental oppression used to assert one's will. So we sort of think of that as mind games. Instrumental is physical or psychological to gain a goal. And I would argue that sticker charts is an instrumental form because we are trying to get a goal, compliance, so we use sticker charts to gain that goal. And then reactive is physical or psychological, and it's a reaction to frustration or perceived threat. It's in response to something. Somebody hits you, you hit them back. Somebody takes your toy, you call them a name. Those are some examples of that. And then lastly, is it mistaken behavior or challenging behavior? And I want you to think about how you define children's behavior in the classroom that challenges you. So Cottrell argues that all challenging behavior should be reframed as mistaken behavior, resulting from some variable as other forms of mistaken behavior. Remember, no child is challenging. It's their communication in the form of behavior that challenges us. That sounds like semantics, but it's really important because if you perceive that a child is challenging, most things that child does, you're going to see as a challenge. Whereas if you can see that this is a child with a myriad of experiences and a myriad of behavior, and sometimes that behavior is a challenge for me, then you can start to get to the heart of what is going on with that behavior. Thanks all for joining us for this mistaken behavior screencast, and we will see you soon.